Samuel Carter's weathered hands froze on the steering wheel, his rusty Ford pickup lurching to a stop as desperate splashing echoed across Cherokee Lake's glassy surface. The German Shepherd wasn't swimming. It was drowning, weighed down by something metallic glinting around its neck. Dorothy Williams dropped her grocery bags on the lakeside path, apples rolling toward the water as her 72-year-old voice cracked into a scream that shattered the October silence. Sam's arthritic fingers fumbled with his truck door handle, muscle memory from 40 years in the coal mines screaming at him to move faster, but his 67-year-old body betraying him when it mattered most, just like the day he couldn't save Martha. Couldn't save Marcus. "Call 911!" he shouted to Dorothy, already stumbling toward the dark water that had claimed too many lives in Sunset Ridge. What kind of cruel God would put another dying soul in front of a man who'd already buried everyone he'd ever loved? Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. 3 years ago, Samuel Carter had been a different man. Back then, his calloused hands still held purpose as they tended to Martha's prize-winning rose garden, and his weathered face still crinkled with genuine laughter when their son Marcus called from his Army base in Colorado. The modest farmhouse on 15 acres outside Sunset Ridge, Tennessee, had been filled with the sounds of a life well lived, Martha humming while she canned peaches, Marcus's boots on the front porch during his surprise visits home, and Sam's own voice reading the morning paper aloud to his wife of 38 years. That was before the cancer took Martha in the spring of 2021, her final breath exhaled among the daffodils she'd planted 40 years earlier. It was before the Army chaplain appeared at Sam's door 6 months later, with news that Staff Sergeant Marcus Carter had been killed by an improvised explosive device outside Kabul, leaving behind only a Purple Heart and a folded flag that now gathered dust on the mantelpiece. Now, at 67, Sam Carter woke each morning to silence so complete it felt like drowning. The 1940s farmhouse, once perfectly sized for a family of 3, had become a museum of memories too painful to face and too precious to pack away. Martha's reading glasses still sat on her bedside table. Marcus's high school football trophies still lined the hallway shelves. The mortgage payment notices, medical bills, and property tax warnings piled up unopened on the kitchen counter, creating a paper mountain of financial ruin that Sam lacked the energy to climb. His daily routine had shrunk to survival basics: black coffee at dawn, staring at the neglected garden where Martha's roses grew wild and thorny, and long conversations with framed photographs that never answered back. The loaded .38 revolver in his bedroom drawer had become a constant companion in his thoughts, a final solution that seemed more appealing with each passing day of chest pains and mounting debt. Dr. Emily Thompson, the town's veterinarian, had been urging Sam to see a cardiologist about his irregular heartbeat, but the estimated cost of heart surgery, $180,000 without insurance coverage, might as well have been $1 million. His monthly Social Security check of $847 barely covered utilities and basic groceries, let alone the medical care that could keep him alive long enough to see another Christmas alone. The property developers had been circling like vultures, led by Frank Morrison, a slick-talking businessman from Nashville who saw dollar signs where Sam saw generations of family history. Morrison's latest offer of $50,000 for land worth 4 times that amount sat crumpled in Sam's trash can, but the foreclosure notice scheduled for next month made even that insulting offer seem like salvation. Sunset Ridge itself reflected Sam's decline, a former coal mining town where 60% of the 3,400 residents were over 65, struggling to survive on fixed incomes while watching their children move away to cities with better opportunities. This was the broken man who now stood at the edge of Cherokee Lake, watching a drowning dog and seeing his own desperate struggle reflected in its panicked eyes. Sam's arthritic knees protested as he waded into Cherokee Lake's icy October water, each step sending sharp pains up his spine while his weak heart hammered against his ribcage. The German Shepherd's desperate paddling had grown weaker, its massive head disappearing beneath the surface for longer intervals as the military collar around its neck caught on a submerged branch, creating a deadly anchor that pulled the exhausted animal deeper into the murky depths. "Easy, boy, easy now," Sam gasped, his voice barely audible over his own labored breathing as he reached the struggling dog. Up close, he could see the animal's intelligent brown eyes wide with terror, its powerful legs still fighting against the inevitable even as hypothermia began to set in. The dog couldn't have weighed less than 80 pounds, and Sam's weakened frame trembled with the effort of keeping them both afloat while his numb fingers worked to free the tangled collar. The military-grade leather collar bore a partially visible brass nameplate that read, "Duke K9 Unit, property of U.S. Army." But the rest of the information was obscured by mud and wear. As Sam finally managed to slip the collar over the dog's head, Duke's body went completely limp, his breathing shallow and irregular. For a terrifying moment, Sam thought he was too late, that he'd watched another life slip away while he stood helplessly by, just like Martha's final moments in the hospital, just like the phone call about Marcus. "Not today," Sam muttered through clenched teeth, wrapping his arms around Duke's massive frame and half swimming, half dragging them both toward shore. Dorothy Williams had called 911 as instructed, and now stood knee-deep in the lake herself, her own 72-year-old body shaking with cold and adrenaline as she helped pull them to safety. Duke lay motionless on the rocky shore, his thick coat matted and waterlogged, making his powerful frame appear smaller and more vulnerable. Sam's hands, guided by muscle memory from a long-ago CPR class he'd taken when Marcus was young, pressed rhythmically on the dog's chest while he counted compressions aloud. "Come on, soldier," he whispered, not knowing why he used that particular word. "Don't give up on me now." After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 30 seconds, Duke's body convulsed, lake water streaming from his mouth as he began to breathe again. His eyes opened slowly, unfocused but alive, and for a moment he lay perfectly still, studying Sam's face with an intensity that seemed almost human. Then, without warning, Duke's body began to shake, not from cold, but from what appeared to be raw terror, as his gaze darted frantically around the lakeside, his ears pinned back against his skull. "Doctor!" "Thompson's on her way," Dorothy called out, having used her cell phone to contact the local veterinarian. "She said to keep him warm and calm until she gets here." But Duke was anything but calm. Despite his weakness, he struggled to his feet and immediately limped toward the tree line, as if desperate to hide from some invisible threat. Sam found himself following the traumatized animal, speaking in the same gentle tone he'd once used with Marcus after the boy's nightmares. "It's okay, Duke. Nobody's going to hurt you here." The dog's reaction to his name was immediate and startling. Duke stopped mid-stride and turned back toward Sam, his intelligent eyes showing a flicker of recognition that seemed impossible for a complete stranger. When Dr. Emily Thompson arrived 20 minutes later, she found Sam sitting cross-legged on the ground beside a massive German Shepherd who had allowed himself to be wrapped in an old Army surplus blanket from Sam's truck. Emily, a 45-year-old single mother who had been Sunset Ridge's only veterinarian for the past 15 years, took one look at the scene and felt something stir in her chest that she hadn't experienced since her own father died. "How did you know to call him Duke?" she asked Sam as she began her examination, noting the dog's obvious signs of malnutrition, old scars along his shoulders and flanks, and the way he flinched at sudden movements. Sam held up the waterlogged military collar. "Says so right here on his nameplate." Looks like he's been through hell and back." As Emily studied the collar more closely, her professional composure faltered. She'd seen enough military working dogs during her veterinary residency at Fort Knox to recognize the specialized equipment, and the implications made her stomach tighten with concern. "Sam," she said quietly, "this isn't just any dog. This collar indicates he's been trained for combat operations." "Dogs like this don't just wander off. They're either retired, reassigned, or—" She didn't finish the sentence, but Sam understood. In his experience, military equipment only ended up abandoned for two reasons: the mission was over, or the soldier wasn't coming home. The revelation hit Sam like a physical blow when Dr. Emily Thompson's scanner beeped over Duke's shoulder blade, revealing the microchip embedded beneath his skin. Her face went pale as she read the digital display. "Classified Military K9, Contact Department of Defense." But it was her reaction that truly unsettled Sam. The way her hands trembled slightly as she set down the scanner, the way she avoided his eyes when she spoke. "Sam, there's something I need to tell you," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something I should have told you years ago." She sat down heavily on her equipment case, suddenly looking every one of her 45 years. "Do you remember the car accident on Highway 441 back in 2003? The one that killed Robert and Susan Thompson?" Sam's weathered face creased with confusion. Of course he remembered. The entire town had mourned the loss of the young couple, especially their 15-year-old daughter who had survived but was left with no family and nowhere to go. "That was your parents," he said slowly, the pieces beginning to fall into place. "And you and Martha took me in," Emily continued, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. "For 2 years, until I graduated high school. You paid for my college applications, helped me get into veterinary school, walked me down the aisle at my wedding because my father couldn't." She looked up at him finally, her eyes red with emotion. "You saved my life, Sam Carter. And then I moved away and barely called, barely visited. And when Martha got sick, I wasn't there for either of you." The silence stretched between them while Duke, despite his exhaustion, seemed to sense the emotional weight of the moment. The dog had positioned himself between Sam and Emily, his intelligent eyes moving back and forth as if he understood that something important was happening. Sam's own eyes filled with tears as 20-year-old memories came flooding back. Emily at their kitchen table doing homework, Martha teaching her how to can peaches, the pride on Martha's face when Emily graduated summa cum laude from Auburn's veterinary program. "We never expected anything from you, Em," he said softly, using the nickname Martha had given her. "You were our daughter in every way that mattered. We just wanted you to be happy." "But I wasn't there when you needed me most," Emily sobbed. "When Martha was dying, when Marcus was deployed, when you were falling apart after the funeral. I knew you were struggling, and I did nothing." Duke suddenly lifted his head, his ears perked toward Sam's truck where a cell phone was ringing. The sound seemed to trigger something in the dog. He stood up abruptly, walked to the truck with military precision, and somehow managed to retrieve the phone with his mouth, bringing it directly to Sam. The action was so unexpected, so perfectly executed, that both Sam and Emily stared in amazement. "How did he know to do that?" Emily asked, but before Sam could answer, the phone rang again. It was Sheriff Jake Bradley, calling with information about Duke's military records. "Sam, you need to hear this," Jake's voice crackled through the speaker. "I ran that dog's information through some contacts I have at the Pentagon. That German Shepherd you pulled out of the lake, he's not just any military working dog. According to his service record, he was partnered with a handler in Afghanistan until recently. The handler was killed in action 6 months ago." Sam felt the blood drain from his face. 6 months ago was exactly when Marcus had died. "What was the handler's name?" he asked, though some part of him already knew the answer. "That's classified information, but I can tell you this much. Duke was scheduled to be retired and relocated to his handler's family, but something went wrong with the paperwork. He was supposed to be delivered to an address in Sunset Ridge, Tennessee, but never made it. He's been listed as missing for the past 3 months. The phone slipped from Sam's trembling hands as the implications hit him. Emily caught it before it could hit the ground, but her own face had gone white with understanding. Duke, as if sensing the emotional earthquake happening around him, moved closer to Sam and gently placed his massive head on the old man's lap. The same gesture Marcus used to make when he was a child seeking comfort. "The address," Sam whispered to Emily, who was still holding the phone. "Ask Jake for the address where Duke was supposed to be delivered." Emily relayed the question, and Jake's answer confirmed their worst fears and greatest hopes. "Twaco 47 Cherokee Ridge Road, Sunset Ridge, Tennessee. Registered to Samuel and Martha Carter, next of kin, for Staff Sergeant Marcus Carter." The revelation shattered something inside Sam's chest that had been frozen solid since Marcus's funeral. This wasn't a random rescue. This was his son's final gift, delayed by bureaucracy and military red tape, delivered by fate and a drowning dog's desperate struggle for survival. Duke hadn't just wandered into Cherokee Lake. He had been trying to find his way home to the family Marcus had told him about, carrying with him the love and protection his handler could no longer provide. Duke seemed to understand that the humans around him had reached some kind of breakthrough. His tail, which had remained tucked between his legs since the rescue, began to wag slowly, tentatively, as if he too was afraid to hope that his long journey might finally be over. "He's been looking for us," Sam said, his voice broken with emotion as he ran his hands through Duke's still damp fur. "All this time, he's been trying to find his way home to a family he's never met, following orders from a soldier who will never come home himself." Emily knelt down beside them both, her professional composure completely abandoned as she wrapped her arms around the man who had been a father to her and the dog who represented a miracle neither of them had dared to pray for. The first night Duke spent in Sam's farmhouse, neither of them slept. Sam lay in his bed listening to the soft padding of paws on hardwood floors as Duke methodically explored every room, every corner, every shadow of the house that Marcus had described in letters the dog could never read but somehow understood. Around 3 in the morning, Sam found Duke sitting perfectly still in front of Marcus's bedroom door, his intelligent brown eyes fixed on the brass nameplate that still read Marcus's room in Martha's careful handwriting. "He's not coming home, boy," Sam whispered, his voice thick with the kind of grief that never fully heals. "Neither of us is ever going to see him again." Duke's ears twitched at Marcus's name, and he turned to look at Sam with an expression so human, so full of shared understanding that Sam felt his knees go weak. Without quite knowing why, he opened Marcus's bedroom door for the first time since the funeral, and Duke immediately walked inside, circling the room once before settling down on the faded army blanket that had covered Marcus's bed since high school. By the end of the first week, Duke had integrated himself into Sam's life with military precision. The dog woke Sam at exactly 5:30 each morning with a gentle nudge, waited patiently while Sam struggled with his morning medication routine, and somehow knew to stay close when Sam's chest pains flared up after climbing the porch steps. Duke's own trauma was evident in his reactions to unexpected sounds. He would drop to the ground and shake when planes flew overhead, and the sound of fireworks from a distant football game sent him hiding under Martha's old sewing table for hours. But it was Duke's uncanny intelligence that truly amazed Sam. The dog learned to open doors by watching Sam struggle with arthritic hands, figured out how to turn on lights by standing on his hind legs, and somehow understood that when Sam sat too long staring at nothing, it was time for a walk to the mailbox or the garden. More importantly, Duke seemed to sense when Sam's thoughts turned dark, appearing at his side with unwavering loyalty whenever the old man's gaze lingered too long on the loaded revolver in the bedroom drawer. Dorothy Williams became their first regular visitor, arriving each Tuesday and Thursday with homemade soup and fresh gossip from town. "That dog of yours is the talk of Sunset Ridge," she informed Sam during her third visit, settling her 72-year-old frame into Martha's favorite kitchen chair while Duke lay watchfully nearby. "Half the town thinks you're crazy for taking in a military dog at your age, and the other half thinks it's the smartest thing you've done in years." The controversy intensified when Frank Morrison made his first official visit to the property, ostensibly to check on Sam's well-being, but actually to pressure him about the pending foreclosure. Duke's reaction to Morrison was immediate and alarming. The normally calm dog positioned himself between Sam and the developer, his hackles raised and a low growl rumbling deep in his chest. "That animal is dangerous," Morrison declared, taking a step backward despite his attempts to appear confident. "A man your age shouldn't be handling a trained attack dog. What if it turns on you? What if it attacks a neighbor's child?" His concern seemed genuine until he added, "Of course, if you decide to sell the property, I'd be happy to arrange for the dog to be properly disposed of." "No charge for that service." Sam's response was quiet but firm. "Duke stays. The property stays. Find yourself another piece of land to destroy, Morrison." But that night, alone with his mounting bills and dwindling bank account, Sam wondered if Morrison might be right about one thing. Maybe a 67-year-old man with a bad heart really couldn't handle a dog with Duke's obvious psychological scars. The breakthrough came during their second week together, when Sam suffered his most severe chest pain episode since Martha's death. He had been trying to repair a loose board on the front porch steps when the crushing pressure in his chest dropped him to his knees, gasping for air that wouldn't come. Duke's response was swift and precise. He immediately ran to the kitchen, somehow managed to knock Sam's cell phone off the counter, and dragged it outside to where Sam lay struggling to breathe. But Duke didn't stop there. Using his nose, he managed to activate the phone's emergency call feature, and when the 911 operator answered, Duke barked 3 short barks, 3 long barks, 3 short barks, SOS in Morse code. The operator, trained to handle unusual emergency calls, dispatched an ambulance immediately while staying on the line. Duke then returned to Sam's side and began applying pressure to his chest with his paws, a canine version of CPR that helped stabilize Sam's breathing until the paramedics arrived. "In 30 years of emergency response, I've never seen anything like it," EMT Sarah Martinez told Emily Thompson later. "That dog performed medical assistance with the precision of a trained professional." Where did Sam find him? Emily's answer was carefully diplomatic. Duke found Sam, but privately she began researching military working dog training protocols, and what she discovered both amazed and concerned her. Dogs like Duke underwent years of specialized training, not just in combat operations, but in medical assistance, PTSD support, and veteran care. They were living, breathing therapeutic instruments worth hundreds of thousands of dollars in training and equipment. The medical scare prompted Emily to make a decision she'd been contemplating since Duke's rescue. She started visiting Sam and Duke every evening after her veterinary clinic closed, ostensibly to monitor Duke's adjustment, but actually to reconnect with the man who had saved her life 20 years earlier. During these visits, she noticed changes in both Sam and Duke that seemed almost miraculous. Sam was eating regular meals for the first time in months, showering daily, and taking his heart medication on schedule. His conversations had expanded beyond memories of Martha and Marcus to include plans for Duke's training, concerns about the dog's nightmares, and questions about proper nutrition for a working dog adjusting to retirement. Most remarkably, Sam had stopped talking about joining Martha and Marcus and started talking about what Duke and I will do tomorrow. Duke's transformation was equally dramatic. The terrified, traumatized animal Emily had examined at the lake was gradually being replaced by a confident, purposeful dog who seemed to understand that his new mission was keeping Sam Carter alive and engaged with life. Duke's military training was evident in everything he did. The way he systematically checked the house's perimeter each morning, the precision with which he followed Sam's daily routine, and the calm authority he displayed when other dogs approached during their walks. But it was the bond forming between Sam and Duke that truly amazed Emily. She watched Sam teach Duke the names of Martha's flowers, saw the dog learn to distinguish between Sam's different types of chest pain, and witnessed moments of pure joy when Duke would bring Sam his slippers or the morning newspaper with the pride of a soldier completing an important mission. The town's reaction to Sam and Duke's partnership was mixed but passionate. Veterans from the local VFW post began stopping by to share stories about their own service dogs, creating an informal support network that helped both Sam and Duke adjust to their new life together. Children walking home from school would detour past Sam's property hoping to catch a glimpse of the famous rescue dog, and Duke seemed to enjoy the attention, though he never strayed far from Sam's side. However, not everyone approved of the arrangement. Morrison's campaign against Sam intensified, with the developer spreading rumors about dangerous military dogs and elderly men who couldn't properly care for trained weapons. Some of Sam's older neighbors worried about Duke's size and military background, while others questioned whether Sam's medication regime made him competent to handle such a specialized animal. The controversy reached a crescendo when Duke had his first major PTSD episode in public. During a routine trip to the hardware store, a customer accidentally knocked over a display of metal pipes, creating a sound similar to gunfire. Duke immediately went into combat mode, barking frantically and positioning himself to protect Sam from invisible threats. The episode lasted only minutes, but store employees called animal control, and Morrison seized the opportunity to file a formal complaint about Duke being a public danger. "This proves my point exactly," Morrison told the Sunset Ridge Town Council. Samuel Carter is an elderly man with serious health problems trying to manage a military-trained attack dog with obvious psychological issues. It's a tragedy waiting to happen, and when it does, this town will be liable for the consequences. Sam's response was to appear before the council with Duke at his side, both of them demonstrating the precise obedience training that made Duke not a threat, but a perfectly controlled companion. "This dog saved my life," Sam told the packed council chamber. "He's not a weapon, he's a lifeline, and anyone who wants to take him away from me will have to explain to Marcus why they're destroying his final gift to his father." The council voted to allow Duke to remain with Sam, but the controversy had taken its toll. Sam's stress triggered another chest pain episode, and Emily's examination revealed that his heart condition was worsening under the pressure of defending his right to keep Duke. The morning of April 1st began like any other, with Duke gently nudging Sam awake at 5:30 and waiting patiently while the old man struggled through his medication routine. But something was different in Duke's behavior. The dog seemed restless, pacing between Sam's bedroom and the front door with an urgency that Sam had never seen before. When Sam tried to follow their usual routine of coffee and breakfast, Duke refused to settle, instead positioning himself by the kitchen window and staring intently toward the road. "What's got into you, boy?" Sam asked, but his question was answered when a convoy of vehicles turned into his driveway. Frank Morrison's black Escalade, followed by a Sheriff's Department cruiser and a truck from Sunset Ridge Animal Control. Sam's heart began its familiar, irregular rhythm as he realized this wasn't a friendly visit. Morrison emerged from his vehicle carrying a folder thick with legal documents, his smile predatory as he approached the front porch. "Morning, Sam. I'm afraid we have some unpleasant business to discuss." Behind him, Animal Control Officer Janet Hayes looked distinctly uncomfortable, while Sheriff Jake Bradley remained in his cruiser, clearly reluctant to be part of whatever Morrison had orchestrated. "The town council has reviewed my formal complaint about your dangerous animal," Morrison continued, "and they've issued an order for Duke to be removed from the premises pending a full psychological evaluation. Given your recent medical episodes, they've also authorized a competency hearing to determine if you're capable of caring for such a specialized animal." Duke's reaction was immediate and terrifying. The dog positioned himself between Sam and Morrison, his body language shifting into the combat stance Emily had seen only once before. But this time Duke didn't bark or growl. Instead, he went completely silent, his intelligent eyes fixed on Morrison with an intensity that made the developer take several steps backward. "You see," Morrison said, his voice higher than usual, "the animal is clearly aggressive. Officer Hayes, please proceed with the removal." Janet Hayes, a 20-year veteran of animal control who had seen every type of dangerous dog imaginable, studied Duke carefully before shaking her head. "That dog isn't showing aggression, Mr. Morrison. He's showing protection. There's a difference." She turned to Sam with genuine sympathy. "But I'm afraid I do have a court order here that requires Duke to be evaluated by a certified animal behaviorist. It's just temporary, Sam, until we can sort this out." The words hit Sam like a physical blow. In the 6 months since Duke's rescue, the dog had become more than a companion. He had become Sam's reason for living, his connection to Marcus, and his lifeline during the dark moments when grief threatened to overwhelm him. The thought of losing Duke felt like losing Marcus all over again. "Please," Sam said, his voice breaking, "don't take him away from me. He's all I have left." But before anyone could respond, Duke made a decision that changed everything. The dog suddenly bolted from the porch, running with military precision toward Martha's old rose garden behind the house. Sam, Morrison, and the others followed, confused by Duke's behavior, until they saw what had captured the dog's attention. Duke was digging frantically at the base of an old oak tree, his powerful claws throwing dirt and dead leaves in all directions. Within minutes, he had uncovered something metallic, a waterproof military container about the size of a shoebox, sealed with combinations locks and bearing official Department of Defense markings. "What the hell is that?" Morrison demanded, but Sam was already kneeling beside Duke, his trembling hands reaching for the container. The combination locks were set to numbers that Sam recognized immediately: Martha's birthday and the date of Marcus's high school graduation. Inside the container, wrapped in plastic and perfectly preserved, were documents that would change everything: Marcus's final letter to his father, Duke's complete service record, and a USB drive labeled, "For Dad, play only when Duke is safe." Sam's hands shook as he read Marcus's letter aloud, his voice growing stronger with each word. "Dad, if you're reading this, it means Duke found you and earned your trust. He's not just a dog, Dad. He's my final mission, my last gift to you and Mom." Duke was trained specifically for veteran support, and his orders are simple: keep you alive, keep you engaged with life, and love you the way I would if I were there. The USB drive contains everything you need to know about Duke's training and his legal status. "Dad, Duke isn't property of the U.S. Army anymore. I legally transferred ownership to you before my deployment. He's yours, free and clear, and no one has the authority to take him away from you." Morrison's face went white as Janet Hayes examined the official transfer documents. "These papers are legitimate," she said, studying the Department of Defense seals and signatures. "Duke is legally registered to Samuel Carter as of 6 months ago. There's no basis for removal." But the revelations were just beginning. The USB drive, when played on Emily's laptop, contained video messages from Marcus that explained Duke's extraordinary abilities. The dog had been trained not just in basic obedience and protection, but in medical alert assistance, PTSD support, and emergency response. His behavior during Sam's chest pain episodes wasn't instinctive. It was the result of years of specialized training designed specifically to help aging veterans. "Dad, Duke knows when your heart rate is irregular," Marcus explained in one video. "He's trained to monitor your medication schedule, recognize signs of depression or suicidal ideation, and provide the kind of companionship that can literally keep you alive. He's also trained to alert emergency services if you're in medical distress. Duke isn't just a pet. He's a living medical device worth more than $200,000 in training and equipment." The most devastating video was Marcus's final message, recorded just days before his death. "Dad, I know you're going to blame yourself for not being able to protect me, just like you blamed yourself for not being able to save Mom. But Duke is proof that love doesn't end with death. It just changes form. Take care of each other, and remember that every day you and Duke are together is a day my love is still alive in the world." Morrison, faced with irrefutable legal evidence and growing hostility from Sheriff Bradley and Officer Hayes, began to retreat. But his parting shot was cruel and calculated. "Legal ownership doesn't change the facts, Carter. You're a sick old man living on borrowed time. When you die, and it won't be long, that dog will end up in a shelter or worse. You're being selfish keeping him here." The words triggered something in Duke that none of them had seen before. The dog didn't growl or bark. Instead, he walked calmly to Morrison's vehicle and methodically began shredding the developer's tires with his teeth, working with the precision of a soldier disabling enemy equipment. "Duke, no!" Sam called, but Emily placed a hand on his arm. "Let him finish," she said quietly. Some people need to learn that there are consequences for cruelty. When Duke was done, Morrison's Escalade sat on 4 flat tires, and the dog returned to Sam's side as calmly as he had left, his mission complete. Morrison, sputtering with rage and threats of lawsuits, had to call for a tow truck while Duke watched from the porch with what could only be described as satisfaction. But the confrontation had taken its toll on Sam. The stress of nearly losing Duke, combined with the emotional impact of Marcus's videos, triggered the most severe chest pain episode he had experienced since Martha's death. This time, Duke's training wasn't enough. Sam collapsed on the porch steps, his face gray with pain as his heart struggled to maintain rhythm. Emily immediately called 911 while Duke performed his medical assistance protocol. But even Duke seemed to understand that this episode was different, more serious. As the ambulance sirens grew louder, Duke did something he had never done before. He howled, a long, mournful sound that seemed to carry all the grief and fear of a soldier watching his commanding officer fall in battle. At the hospital, Dr. Patricia Reeves delivered the news Sam had been dreading. His heart condition had deteriorated beyond the point where medication could help. He needed immediate surgery, and even with the operation, his long-term prognosis was uncertain. "How long do I have?" Sam asked, and Dr. Reeves's answer was brutally honest. "Without surgery, maybe weeks." "With surgery, possibly years, but there are no guarantees." The cost of the surgery, $180,000, might as well have been $1 million for a man whose total assets were a heavily mortgaged house and a pickup truck from 1998. Insurance had already denied the claim, citing Sam's age and pre-existing conditions as factors that made the surgery economically unfeasible. Duke, meanwhile, had taken up residence in the hospital parking lot, refusing to leave despite Emily's attempts to coax him home. The dog's vigil became a local news story, with visitors and staff bringing him food and water while he maintained his post outside the cardiac unit where Sam lay fighting for his life. The surgery went wrong from the very beginning. Dr. Patricia Reeves emerged from the operating room after 6 grueling hours with the kind of expression that medical professionals reserve for their worst news. Sam's heart had stopped twice during the procedure, and while they had managed to restart it both times, the damage was extensive. He was alive, but barely, sustained by machines that beeped and hummed with mechanical precision in the cardiac intensive care unit. "The next 48 hours are critical," Dr. Reeves told Emily, who had become Sam's unofficial next of kin in the absence of any other family. "His heart is extremely weak, and there were complications we didn't anticipate. The scar tissue from years of untreated damage was more extensive than our imaging showed. We did what we could, but honestly, it's going to take a miracle." Outside in the hospital parking lot, Duke had stopped eating. For 3 days, the German Shepherd had maintained his vigil, accepting water from kind strangers but refusing all food. His powerful frame was visibly shrinking, and his once bright eyes had grown dull with a kind of grief that seemed too human for an animal to possess. Animal control officers had tried to remove him multiple times, but Duke simply returned, as if drawn by an invisible thread to the place where Sam lay fighting for his life. Emily found herself splitting her time between Sam's bedside and the parking lot where Duke was slowly wasting away. The dog's deterioration was heartbreaking to watch. This magnificent animal who had survived combat zones and learned to heal human trauma was now dying of what could only be called a broken heart. "He knows," Emily whispered to Dorothy Williams during one of her visits. "Somehow Duke knows that Sam might not make it, and he's giving up." Dorothy, who had been bringing soup to the hospital staff and camping chairs for Duke's supporters, nodded grimly. At 72, she understood the kind of bond that could make survival seem pointless without the other half of your soul. The worst news came on the 4th day. Frank Morrison, with legal sharks circling like vultures, had accelerated the foreclosure proceedings on Sam's property. With Sam unconscious and no one legally authorized to make decisions on his behalf, the bank was seizing the farmhouse and 15 acres that had been in the Carter family for 3 generations. "It's perfectly legal," Morrison told a local news reporter who had come to cover Duke's parking lot vigil. "Mr. Carter defaulted on his mortgage payments months ago. The fact that he's hospitalized doesn't change his financial obligations. The property will be auctioned next week, and I have every intention of acquiring it for development purposes." The reporter, a young woman named Jessica Chen from the Knoxville NBC affiliate, had come expecting a feel-good story about a loyal dog waiting for his owner. Instead, she found herself documenting what appeared to be a perfect storm of American failures: a veteran's father dying because he couldn't afford medical care, a military service dog being abandoned by the system that created him, and a corporate developer profiting from human misery. Her segment, which aired that evening, sparked something unexpected. Within hours, the hospital parking lot began filling with people. Veterans from across Tennessee, dog lovers, senior citizens who saw themselves in Sam's struggle, and ordinary citizens outraged by the injustice of the situation. They brought camping chairs, coffee, and homemade signs reading "Save Duke's Home" and "Honor Our Veterans." But their support, while emotionally meaningful, couldn't change the medical reality inside the hospital. Sam's condition continued to deteriorate. His kidney function was failing, his blood pressure required constant medication adjustments, and most ominously, he hadn't regained consciousness since the surgery. Dr. Reeves privately told Emily that they were looking at end-of-life decisions. Duke seemed to sense that time was running out. On the evening of the 5th day, he did something that stunned everyone who witnessed it. The dog somehow made it past hospital security and up to the cardiac unit, using emergency stairwells and service corridors with the precision of his military training. When nurses found him, Duke was lying on the floor beside Sam's bed, his massive head resting as close as possible to Sam's still form. "He's not supposed to be here," Nurse Margaret Patterson said, but her voice lacked conviction. In 40 years of medical care, she had seen enough mysteries to know that sometimes healing came from unexpected sources. "I should call security." Emily, who had been dozing in a chair beside Sam's bed, made a decision that went against every hospital protocol. "Give us 5 minutes," she said. "Just 5 minutes. And then I'll take Duke back outside." What happened next would be debated by medical professionals for years afterward. As Duke settled beside Sam's bed, the old man's vital signs began to stabilize for the first time since surgery. His heart rate, which had been erratic and weak, found a steadier rhythm. His blood pressure, which had required constant medication adjustments, normalized. Most remarkably, his brain activity, which had been minimal, showed sudden spikes of activity. Dr. Reeves, summoned by the alarmed monitors, arrived expecting to find a patient in crisis. Instead, she found Sam Carter slowly opening his eyes for the first time in 5 days, his gaze immediately finding Duke's familiar form. "Hey, boy," Sam whispered, his voice barely audible but unmistakably alive. "Did I miss chow time?" Duke's response was immediate and overwhelming. The dog began to whimper and shake, his tail wagging with desperate joy as he tried to get closer to Sam without disturbing the medical equipment. For a moment, everyone in the room forgot about hospital protocols and watched a reunion that seemed to defy medical explanation. But even miracles have their limits. While Sam's consciousness was a victory, his overall condition remained critical. Dr. Reeves explained that while the emotional boost might have helped him wake up, the underlying heart damage was still life-threatening. Without the surgery being completed successfully, Sam had weeks at most. The financial reality remained unchanged as well. The hospital bills were approaching $300,000, and Sam's insurance had denied virtually every claim. Morrison's foreclosure was proceeding on schedule, and even if Sam survived, he would be homeless and bankrupt. Duke, however, seemed to understand something that the humans around him didn't. That night, after being reluctantly returned to the parking lot, the dog began exhibiting behavior that Emily recognized from Marcus's training videos. Duke was searching for something, following a pattern that seemed random but was actually methodical and precise. "He's working," Emily told Dorothy as they watched Duke pace the hospital grounds. Marcus trained him for specific tasks, and Duke thinks there's still a mission to complete. Neither of them could have imagined that Duke's mission was about to lead them to a discovery that would change everything. A discovery that Marcus had planned for, even from beyond the grave, but that required Duke to prove himself worthy of the trust a dead soldier had placed in him. Duke's behavior in the hospital parking lot had grown increasingly frantic over the past 24 hours, and Emily finally understood why when she followed the dog's precise search pattern back to Sam's property. Duke wasn't randomly pacing. He was following GPS coordinates burned into his military training, coordinates that led to a second location Marcus had prepared for exactly this kind of emergency. At exactly 6:30 a.m. on the 7th day of Sam's hospitalization, Duke led Emily to Martha's prized rose garden, but this time he bypassed the oak tree where they had found the first container. Instead, he went directly to a specific rose bush, Martha's favorite peace rose that bloomed yellow and pink every spring. Duke began digging with the same methodical precision he had shown before, but this time he uncovered something much larger. A waterproof military case the size of a small suitcase, buried 3 feet deep and sealed with biometric locks that required both a fingerprint scan and a voice recognition pattern. Emily's hands trembled as she called Sam at the hospital, putting the phone on speaker so Duke could hear his voice. "Sam, I need you to say exactly what I tell you, and I need Duke to place his paw on this scanner at the same time." The biometric system was more sophisticated than anything Emily had ever seen outside of military installations, and when both Sam's voice pattern and Duke's paw print registered simultaneously, the locks disengaged with a series of mechanical clicks that seemed to echo with finality. Inside the case, Emily found documents that took her breath away. Marcus hadn't just prepared for the possibility of his death. He had prepared for the exact scenario they were now facing. There was a complete life insurance policy worth $2.5 million that had been held up by the Department of Defense's classified records system, waiting for Duke to complete his mission and prove that Sam was capable of caring for himself. There were legal documents establishing the Marcus Carter Foundation for Senior Veteran Support, with Sam as the executive director and Duke as the certified therapy dog ambassador. Most incredibly, there was a detailed financial plan that would not only pay for Sam's medical care, but establish a legacy that could help thousands of other veterans facing similar crises. But the most devastating discovery was Marcus's final video message, accessible only when both Sam's voice and Duke's biometric data confirmed they had survived their initial bonding period. Emily rushed back to the hospital with her laptop, gathering Sam, Dorothy, Sheriff Bradley, and even Dr. Reeves in Sam's room as she played the message that Marcus had recorded just days before his death. "Dad, if you're watching this, it means Duke has passed his final test." Marcus's voice filled the hospital room, his young face serious but filled with love. "Duke wasn't just trained to be your companion. He was trained to save your life in every way possible. The insurance money has been earning interest for 6 months, waiting for confirmation that you and Duke are a bonded team. The foundation documents are already filed with the state of Tennessee, and Duke is certified as a therapy dog, capable of helping other veterans just like you." Marcus's image smiled, and for a moment he looked exactly like the 8-year-old boy who used to help Sam in Martha's garden. "But Dad, there's something else. Duke has one more mission, and it's the most important one of all. He's going to help you understand that your life isn't over. It's just beginning a new chapter. The foundation will give you purpose. Duke will give you companionship, and together you're going to save lives, just like Duke saved yours." The video continued with detailed instructions for accessing the insurance money, establishing the foundation, and beginning Duke's work as a certified therapy dog. Marcus had thought of everything, down to the legal paperwork needed to stop Morrison's foreclosure and the medical authorizations required to pay for Sam's surgery completion. Dr. Reeves, who had initially been skeptical of the emotional reunion between Sam and Duke, found herself wiping tears from her eyes. "Mr. Carter, your son arranged for the finest cardiac care available. With this insurance settlement, we can complete your surgery at Vanderbilt Medical Center with the best heart surgeons in the Southeast. Your prognosis just changed from terminal to excellent." But the revelations weren't finished. Sheriff Bradley, who had been quietly investigating Morrison's business practices, revealed his own shocking discoveries. "Sam, Morrison's been running a systematic scam targeting elderly property owners throughout East Tennessee. He identifies seniors with medical or financial crises, accelerates foreclosure proceedings through legal manipulation, and acquires properties at fraction of their value. Your case isn't isolated. He's done this to 17 other families in the past 2 years." The legal implications were staggering. Morrison had been using inside information from hospital billing departments to identify seniors facing medical bankruptcy, then timing his property acquisitions to coincide with their health crises. Duke's case had inadvertently exposed a criminal conspiracy that had destroyed dozens of families across the region. Emily's investigation into Duke's background revealed even more surprises. Through Marcus's military contacts, she learned that Duke wasn't just any service dog. He was part of an experimental program pairing specially trained dogs with the families of fallen soldiers. The program had been canceled due to budget cuts, leaving dogs like Duke in bureaucratic limbo. But Marcus had managed to secure Duke's placement through personal connections and careful planning. Your son spent his last 6 months alive arranging every detail of Duke's care and training, Colonel Sarah Mitchell from Fort Campbell explained during a video call to Sam's hospital room. Marcus knew the risks of his deployment, and he was determined to ensure that if something happened to him, you wouldn't face your grief alone. Duke represents the most advanced veteran support training we've ever developed. The story broke nationally when Jessica Chen's follow-up report revealed not just Duke's remarkable loyalty, but the systematic exploitation of elderly veterans that Morrison's arrest had uncovered. Within days, Sam and Duke were receiving visitors from across the country, other military families, veteran support organizations, and even members of Congress who wanted to understand how one soldier's love for his father had exposed a widespread pattern of elder abuse. Morrison's arrest came on the 10th day of Sam's hospitalization, just as Sam was being transferred to Vanderbilt for his follow-up surgery. FBI agents had uncovered evidence of mail fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy charges that would likely send Morrison to federal prison for decades. The properties he had fraudulently acquired were being returned to their original owners, and the families he had victimized were finally seeing justice. Duke's reaction to Morrison's arrest was subtle but significant. The dog, who had shown such aggressive protective behavior toward the developer, now seemed completely relaxed for the first time since his rescue. It was as if Duke understood that his protective mission was complete and he could focus entirely on his healing work with Sam. The successful completion of Sam's heart surgery at Vanderbilt became a celebration attended by dozens of people whose lives had been touched by Sam and Duke's story. Dorothy Williams organized a homecoming party that filled Sam's property with visitors, volunteers, and media representatives documenting the launch of the Marcus Carter Foundation. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came when Sam was finally strong enough to visit Marcus's grave with Duke for the first time since the dog's rescue. Duke approached the headstone with military precision, sat at attention for exactly 60 seconds, then gently placed a rose from Martha's garden at the base of the grave marker. "Mission accomplished, son," Sam whispered, his voice steady for the first time in months. "Duke and I are going to be just fine." Duke's response was to place his massive paw on Sam's hand, sealing a bond that Marcus had arranged from beyond the grave. The insurance settlement was processing, the foundation was officially established, and most importantly, Sam Carter had found a reason to live that went far beyond his own survival. The media attention brought unexpected opportunities. Publishers wanted to buy the rights to their story. Documentary filmmakers were requesting interviews, and veteran organizations across the country were asking for Sam and Duke to visit their facilities. But Sam's focus remained simple, honoring Marcus's memory by helping other veterans find the same hope that Duke had brought to his own life. The final surprise came when Duke led Sam to one more location on the property, a spot near the old barn where Marcus had played as a child. There, Duke uncovered a simple wooden box containing Marcus's childhood letters to Santa Claus, including one from age 8 that read, "Dear Santa, I don't want toys this year. I want my dad to never be lonely even after I'm grown up and gone. Can you send him a dog that will love him as much as I do?" 6 months after Sam's successful heart surgery, the Marcus Carter Foundation had become a beacon of hope for senior veterans across the Southeast. The old farmhouse that had once echoed with loneliness now bustled with activity as volunteers, visiting veterans, and therapy dogs in training filled every room with purpose and laughter. Sam, his health fully restored and his spirit renewed, had transformed from a man contemplating suicide into a nationally recognized advocate for veteran mental health and animal-assisted therapy. The foundation's success exceeded everyone's expectations. In its first 6 months, the program had successfully paired 247 senior veterans with specially trained therapy dogs, reducing suicide rates in participating communities by 60% and hospital readmissions by 40%. Duke, now officially certified as a master therapy dog, had personally trained 15 other dogs in the specialized techniques Marcus had programmed into his military conditioning. Emily Thompson had taken a leave of absence from her veterinary practice to serve as the Foundation's medical director, finally fulfilling the family bond she had abandoned 20 years earlier. Watching Sam work with other grieving veterans, seeing him find strength in helping others heal, she understood that Marcus's greatest gift hadn't been the insurance money or the legal protections. It had been giving his father a mission that transformed personal grief into collective healing. Dorothy Williams, now 73 and serving as the Foundation's volunteer coordinator, had found her own renewed purpose in organizing the daily operations that brought hope to so many families. "Sam Carter saved my life too," she told a documentary crew filming the Foundation's 6-month anniversary celebration. "I was just existing before this started, counting down days until my own death. Now I wake up every morning knowing there's important work to do." The documentary, titled Duke's Last Mission, had premiered on HBO the previous month to critical acclaim and massive viewership. The film followed 3 military families whose lives had been transformed by the Foundation's work, showing how the bond between humans and specially trained dogs could heal wounds that traditional therapy couldn't reach. Sam and Duke had become reluctant celebrities, their story inspiring similar programs in 12 other states. But perhaps the most meaningful transformation had occurred in Sam himself. The man who had once stared at loaded revolvers and calculated the cost of existence versus the price of dying, now spoke to packed auditoriums about the power of purpose in defeating despair. His message was simple but profound. Grief doesn't end, but it can be transformed into something that serves life instead of destroying it. The Foundation's headquarters occupied the entire first floor of the old farmhouse, while Sam and Duke lived upstairs in comfortable quarters that Martha would have loved. The walls were covered with photographs of successful veteran dog pairings, letters from grateful families, and Marcus's military commendations alongside Duke's therapy dog certifications. It was a living memorial that celebrated life rather than mourning death. Duke's role had evolved from patient to teacher, working with newly rescued military working dogs who needed to transition from combat operations to therapeutic companionship. His training sessions were studied by animal behaviorists from major universities, who marveled at Duke's ability to communicate complex emotional concepts to dogs who had never experienced civilian life. "Duke doesn't just train other dogs," observed Dr. James Morrison from Auburn University's veterinary psychology program. "He teaches them how to recognize human emotional distress and respond with precisely calibrated comfort behaviors. It's the most sophisticated interspecies communication system I've ever documented." The financial success of the Foundation had created opportunities that Sam had never imagined possible. The insurance settlement, combined with donations from supporters nationwide, had established an endowment worth over $8 million. Sam's book, Letters to Duke, A Father's Journey Through Grief to Hope, had spent 18 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list, with all proceeds supporting the Foundation's expansion. More importantly, the Foundation had created a model that was being replicated across the country. Congressional representatives had visited the farmhouse to study the program's methodology, and the Department of Veterans Affairs had allocated $50 million to establish similar programs in 25 states. Sam's testimony before Congress, with Duke sitting calmly at his side, had moved seasoned politicians to tears and prompted bipartisan legislation supporting veteran animal therapy initiatives. The legal aftermath of Frank Morrison's arrest had brought justice to 17 families whose properties had been fraudulently seized. Morrison himself was serving a 12-year federal sentence, and the civil settlements from his criminal enterprise had established victim compensation funds totaling $37 million. Sam had used his settlement to purchase additional property surrounding the foundation, creating a training campus that could accommodate 50 veteran dog pairs at a time. But beyond the statistics and media attention, the real measure of success was visible in quieter moments. Veterans who arrived at the foundation broken and hopeless, left with renewed purpose and loyal companions. Dogs who had been abandoned by military bureaucracy found new missions that honored their training while healing their own psychological wounds. One particularly moving success story involved Sergeant First Class Maria Gonzalez, a 48-year-old Iraq veteran who had lost both legs to an IED explosion and subsequently lost her will to live. Her pairing with Ranger, a German Shepherd mix with his own combat trauma, had created a bond that transformed both their lives. 6 months later, Maria was training to become a foundation counselor, while Ranger worked as a therapy dog for other wounded veterans. "Sam showed me that survival isn't enough," Maria explained during the foundation's anniversary celebration. "You have to find a way to make your survival meaningful to other people. That's what turns tragedy into triumph." The anniversary celebration itself was a testament to the foundation's impact. Over 300 people gathered on the grounds where Sam had once contemplated ending his life, including veterans from every branch of military service, therapy dogs and their handlers, families whose lives had been transformed by the program, and community leaders who had witnessed the foundation's positive impact on their region. Duke, now 8 years old and showing some gray around his muzzle, moved through the crowd with the dignity of a military veteran receiving honors. Children petted him gently, while their grandparents shared stories of their own military service. Other therapy dogs deferred to his leadership, recognizing the authority that came from his unique training and experience. The keynote speaker was General Patricia Hayes, former commander of the Army's Military Working Dog Program, who had flown in from Washington specifically to honor Duke's contribution to veteran mental health. "In 40 years of military service, I have never seen a single animal have such a profound impact on human welfare," she told the assembled crowd. "Duke represents the very best of what military working dogs can achieve, not just in combat, but in the healing that must follow combat." Sam's speech that day was brief but powerful. Standing at the podium with Duke at his side, he looked out over a crowd that represented the extended family Marcus had somehow created through his foresight and love. "My son Marcus knew something that took me 67 years to learn," Sam said, his voice carrying clearly across the grounds. "Love doesn't end with death, it just changes form and finds new ways to serve life." He paused, reaching down to touch Duke's head in a gesture that had become automatic over their months together. "Marcus sent me Duke not just to save my life, but to teach me that my life could save other lives. Every veteran who finds hope through this foundation, every dog who finds a new mission, every family that heals from their grief, that's Marcus's love still working in the world." The celebration concluded with a moment that captured the essence of everything the foundation represented. As the sun set over the Tennessee hills, Sam and Duke walked together to the small memorial garden where Marcus's grave was surrounded by roses that bloomed year-round. Duke performed his customary military salute, sitting at attention for exactly 60 seconds before placing his daily rose at the headstone. But this time, he wasn't alone. 15 other therapy dogs, all trained by Duke over the past 6 months, joined him in the salute. Their handlers, all veterans who had found new purpose through the foundation, stood silently behind them, It was a ceremony that honored the dead while celebrating the living, a perfect symbol of how grief could be transformed into grace. As they walked back toward the house, now filled with overnight guests who had traveled from across the country to attend the celebration, Sam reflected on the miracle of his transformation. A year ago, he had been a broken man counting down the days until death. Now, at 68, he was planning programs that would impact thousands of lives for decades to come. "You know what, Duke?" Sam said as they climbed the porch steps together. "I think Marcus would be proud of what we've built here." Duke's response was to place his paw on Sam's hand, a gesture that had become their private ritual of communion. In that touch, Sam felt the presence of everyone who had shaped his journey: Martha's enduring love, Marcus's visionary planning, and Duke's unwavering loyalty. It was a moment of perfect gratitude, a recognition that sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as the deepest losses. The farmhouse lights glowed warmly in the gathering darkness, welcoming travelers who had come seeking hope and healing. Inside, veterans shared stories with other veterans, therapy dogs curled up beside their human partners, and volunteers prepared for another day of transformation. It was exactly what Marcus had envisioned when he planned Duke's final mission, a place where love conquered loneliness, where purpose defeated despair, and where the bonds between humans and animals created miracles that neither could accomplish alone. If you're between 55 and 68, you know that hollow feeling when the house gets too quiet, when the phone doesn't ring, when you wonder if your best years are behind you. Sam Carter felt that way too, a 67-year-old widower who had lost his wife to cancer and his son to war, sitting alone in a house that echoed with memories instead of laughter. He was counting down days until death when Duke, a traumatized military dog, literally fell into his life through a drowning rescue that saved them both. What happened next proves that it's never too late for a second chapter. Sam didn't just find a companion, he discovered his greatest purpose. Together, they built the Marcus Carter Foundation, transforming personal grief into a mission that has saved hundreds of senior veterans from suicide and loneliness. At 68, Sam went from planning his own death to planning programs that will impact thousands of lives for decades. Your story isn't over. Your wisdom, experience, and capacity for love are exactly what this world needs. Sometimes our greatest gifts come disguised as our deepest losses, and sometimes the family we need finds us when we least expect it. Questions for you. What dream did you put aside that you could still pursue? Have you ever felt like Sam, wondering if your purpose was finished? And what helped you push through those dark moments? Leave a comment below and share your story. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.